We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
Back in studio with my guy, Anthony Treash, here on the Wednesday episode of 2-for-1 Drafts. Be hard not to ignore the elephant in the room. Obviously, a very tense United States today with the election still ongoing. I have one takeaway, and this may divide some people. Treash, I want to open with a takeaway here. John King was absolutely in his bag last night on CNN. It was honestly one of the more impressive things I've ever seen a content creator do. Kept people engaged, constantly informed. I mean, this guy knows the working class in every single county in the United States. I think it was one of the more impressive things I saw last night.
I know. I aspire to be John King, but yeah, hopefully we get a nice little breakaway from all the discussion. We're just here to party, so hopefully we can provide some positive insight.
John King, not a single mistake on the board, handled the touchscreen with class, handled everything with class, made a handful of coffee jokes. Again, I'm not the only one who's shouting out John King on Twitter last night, but I have to commend the guy. I think distraction is the word a lot of like non-politics content creators are talking about right now, but distraction has that negative connotation. I think it's distraction. I was a distraction in 5th grade. People said, hey, my report card say he's a distraction. Right now, it's a positive distraction. We're going to talk a little bit rookies, some college football prospects. Let's go ahead and just get right into it. Starting with MACtion Wednesday night. By the time you're listening to this, you might be watching some MACtion. There are no MAC players currently listed inside PFF's Top 100 2021 NFL Draft Board, which I encourage you all to check out on PFF.com. We're not going to touch on the MACtion tonight. I don't think there are a ton of prospect battles to watch.
Buffalo?
What is your take on Buffalo?
Taylor Riggins, Malcolm Kuntz. I mean, this team is Jared Patterson.
You've been on Buffalo's hype train since like 2016.
You knew this. You knew this coming out. Khalil Mack, Ladarius Mack. He hasn't panned out. He probably won't pan out in the NFL, but he was dominant in college. And then they have one of the best edge duos in college football. I know they play for Buffalo, but in college football, Taylor Riggins, Malcolm Kuntz. I'm all in on Buffalo. They're winning the MAC. Bet those futures. Bet those futures.
Bet those futures. You think Buffalo's winning the MAC?
I think they're winning the MAC.
Interesting. That's good to know. All right, for Thursday, Friday, it's going to be a little Mountain West action. Also, Miami at NC State. Starting with the Mountain West, our Aztecs, Treash. For those who don't know, San Diego State alum, class of 2017. Go Aztecs. San Jose State is going to take on SDSU as 9.5-point dogs. The prospect to watch in this one, who is consistently cracked, Mike Renner's top 100 on PFF.com, is Trey Walker, the wide receiver for San Jose State. A smaller receiver, plays a lot of outside there, gets a ton of volume, a ton of targets. I didn't come away super impressed with his tape in 2019. And in 2018, it was a little bit better. I'm interested to see how he looks this year because I think Trey Walker has an opportunity to be one of these depth pieces in what is a very deep 2021 receiving class. But I still need to see more from Trey Walker. Mike Renner says he's a good route runner, likes what he does, likes his ability to separate. But I still haven't seen it again against a ton of single coverage look. San Diego State is known for having a very, very tough secondary. They're playing well this year again. What is your opinion on Trey Walker? And preview this game for me.
I love Trey Walker. I think his body control is remarkable. I mean, he had some beautiful back shoulders last week. PFF play of the week on another back shoulder in the end zone toe tapper. I think I'm with Mike Renner. I think he's one of the most underrated receivers in college football. I believe he came in 12th in our college football wide receiver rankings that drops on Wednesday. And I kind of like Nick Starkel. He has kind of brought back, back in 2017 with Texas A&M, showed some flashes, kind of tailed off there, was absolutely terrible for Arkansas last year. I was still optimistic in him when we ranked all 130 FBS quarterbacks because the competition is significantly lower in the Mountain West than it is.
Jesus, you didn't have to emphasize significantly. Okay, you're talking to a San Diego State alum. Can you be nice to us here?
I know, but I like Nick Starkel, 82.8 PFF grade through 2 games. But yeah, San Jose State, they were loving the PFF Team of the Week last week. We talked about it on Monday. Your Aztecs with 3 offensive linemen on there. I kind of like the Aztecs.
Yep. All right, another game on that Thursday, Friday slate is BYU at Boise State. Boise State only 3-point dogs in that game. BYU only favored by 3. The 2 prospects to know in that game and for every BYU game moving forward is Zach Wilson, the quarterback who I think is the favorite for the quarterback 4 spot in the 2021 NFL draft. That's behind Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and obviously Trey Lance of North Dakota State. But the other prospect I think you have to consistently bring up with BYU now is Brady Christensen, the tackle, who is grading up there with the best in football right now. What is your opinion of those 2 prospects and what kind of challenges they face against Boise State?
So I think this game has the potential to be the most impactful regular season game in college football this year for the 2021 NFL draft.
Okay, Treash.
So.
Okay, John King.
I'm just saying,
I like it.
I'm just saying because Boise State, entering the year, we all penciled this game in after Zach Wilson was going through and just wrecking this lower competition, saying this was going to be the game we find out who he really is. And Boise State's looking a little bit better than we even thought. They are easily top 25 team in college football, 6th in EPA per play allowed on defense. And then if Jack Sears plays, he looked exceptional last week. He peppered Air Force downfield, just one uncatchable ball all game long. I think this could be a shootout. And if Zach Wilson, takes care of this defense like he has been with all this lower competition, I think he is going to kind of solidify himself in that quarterback 4 spot. And I don't know, maybe does he challenge Trey Lance for that quarterback 3 spot? Maybe.
You think he can challenge Trey Lance for the quarterback 3 spot? My problem there is the reason Trey Lance is quarterback 3 are things that can't change. It's the athleticism and it's obviously the arm talent. You talk to Daniel Jeremiah, which I think we talked before the season. He's debating putting Trey Lance as quarterback 2 for those reasons alone. Like he sees Trey Lance's arm talent and his athleticism, his raw ability as some of the best we've seen coming out of North Dakota State, of any college football player. And I think that for those reasons, like if it were a sample size thing for production, whatever, maybe it'd be that. But the arm talent's not going away. If you're going to put Zach Wilson ahead of Trey Lance, you're doubting the things that you just already knew about Trey Lance. I think Zach Wilson will stay in at QB4. I think Trey Lance remains at QB3. But it'll be interesting to see that game. Some good stuff to watch on Friday before the Saturday slate. Last game I want to mention on the Thursday, Friday slate is Miami at NC State. NC State does not have a single player in PFF's top 100 right now, but Miami does. And Brevin Jordan, the tight end, and Quincy Roche, the edge defender. Gregor Rousseau, obviously a top 20 player as well, but he has opted out for the 2020 season. Start with Brevin Jordan for me. I've been saying for a while now, a couple months, that this tight end class is very good because we're talking about Kyle Pitts, Pat Freiermuth, Charlie Kolar of Iowa State. But Brevin Jordan's another guy on this list that I feel really good about being a piece in the NFL, an actual tight end that can start in the NFL.
Yeah, I had higher expectations for Brevin Jordan, but through 4 games, he's kind of underwhelmed just a little bit. 62.3 PFF grade. I thought he would be, challenging for that number 1 tight end spot. I mean, he's a great athlete, but I mean, that's Kyle Pitts now. And I think you have to say Pat Freiermuth right there at number 2. So I'm a little disappointed with this season, especially with De'Aaron King there. Back in week 3, had an incredible game against Louisville, 120 yards receiving, 76.2 receiving grade. I thought we would see consistently that Brevin Jordan, but Quincy Roche, I've been very impressed with him. Last year at Temple, we all know one of the highest graded pass rushers in college football. This year, he hasn't been able to completely match that same production, the ridiculous production, 93.3 pass rush grade in 2019 at Temple. But he's been consistently getting after the quarterback week in and week out for Miami, and I think that bodes very well for his NFL future.
I wanted to, and I apologize, but I'm jumping back to Zach Wilson just for a second. And he is the highest graded quarterback in college football right now. He jumped ahead of Trevor Lawrence in recent weeks. And also from an accuracy perspective, which PFF charts ball location and accuracy at the collegiate level and the NFL level, Zach Wilson ranks inside the top 15 in accuracy percentage according to PFF. I think the accuracy, him ranking high there while having the arm talent and the mobile athleticism, again, I think QB4 might be a lock for this kid. A lot of people really like him coming out of BYU.
That's why I think he might challenge for that quarterback 3 spot.
Maybe.
I do not.
Maybe I'm wrong there.
Everyone is, the biggest criticism on Zach Wilson is the level of competition. We're not talking about that when it comes to Trey Lance, and he's not doing well as a passer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, against Central Arkansas, he looked really bad as a passer. You could see the arm talent.
Yeah.
You could see his athleticism on the ground. But at this point, if Zach Wilson continues to do this against Boise State, I want to take what I've seen on the college field. Zach Wilson has proved what he can do. And, you can't change really accuracy. When we saw him make the jump from last year to this year significantly, you can kind of attribute some of that to the injuries he had. So I think I would lean Zach Wilson if he dominates Boise State like
All you're saying is let's have the conversation. It wasn't a conversation 2 weeks
Exactly.
ago, 3 weeks ago. Let's have the conversation. Maybe I am willing to have that conversation. All right. Sorry to jump
As long
back
as
from
I
the
can
Brevin
flip you
Jordan,
there.
Quincy Roche talk, but I think watching that game, NC State 10.5-point dogs. Also, Derek King, #fun to watch. One of those fun players to watch in college football right now. Always a treat there on Friday night. Moving to Saturday, opening up with this. I think UNC is must-watch football in the ACC for the prospect potential they do have. UNC goes against Duke. They're 11-point favorites there. Sam Howell, an underclassman a lot of people like. Diami Brown, Des Newsome, 2 receivers we've talked about on this podcast a ton. But I want to open the conversation with this. These running backs at UNC are insane. Michael Carter and Javonte Williams are 2 of the highest-graded running backs in college football. Javonte Williams' forced missed tackle rate, what does he have, 45 broken tackles on 96 carries? This guy has been insane. What's your opinion of these 2 backs?
Yeah, I mean, going back to even last season, these were 2 of my favorite running backs. We had them as a top 10 backfield in the PFF College magazine. They were almost, both of them, each of them were almost top 10 running backs overall in all of college football, but they've been even better than I thought they would be. I mean, you're talking about Derek King, #fun to watch. These 2 are, because some of the cuts they're making, I mean, it is incredible. Sometimes it kind of frustrates me because I think North Carolina, especially early on, they knew what they had there and they were just force feeding these guys, just constantly, just shoving the ball down their throats, telling them to go make big plays, not letting Sam Howell do his best work with his arm. But that's not to say that they're not extremely good at what they do. But I want to see Sam Howell continue to air it out, get Daz Newsome involved with Diami Brown. I want both of them involved because they have the potential to be the number 1 deep passing attack in college football. But I think they should have their way with this Duke defense, even though Chris Rump's there. I mean, he's starting to heat up over the last few games, but man, they have not performed well at all whatsoever on either side of the ball, especially Chase Bryce, man. I had higher hopes for him. He looked good in garbage time, and I probably overvalued that garbage time at Clemson just a little bit because right now he's one of the lower graded quarterbacks in the ACC.
Javonte Williams, 5'10", 220 pounds, exactly how you want the running back position built. His PFF grade has improved every single year of his collegiate career, up to a 93.0 PFF grade this year. And to talk about his forced missed tackle rate, he has 45 missed tackles forced on 95 carries. That's a 0.47 forced missed tackles per touch or per carry count. That leads all of college football, ahead of guys that are drawing Heisman interest. I always bring this up. Tank Bigsby of Auburn, the true freshman there. And Michael Carter, too, 0.33 forced missed tackle rate there for Michael Carter. That ranks tied for 7th in college football. Those 2 backs are forcing missed tackles with reckless advantage. Javonte Williams, the better of the 2. Jumping next now to Michigan versus Indiana, another team that I feel like, regardless of who they're playing, you're probably going to have to turn on the game because they do have a lot of prospect potential in Michigan. But also, I need to kick it to you to start here. Michael Penix Jr., one of the top 3 graded passers, I think, in the Big Ten right now, had that big upset win over Penn State. Where are you with Penix Jr. right now?
I think he's good. I think he's a fringe top 10 quarterback in the FBS right now.
Wow.
He showed it last year, and it was a little ugly to start that very first game against Penn State. I'm not going to lie. It was kind of boom or bust. One throw perfectly placed. The other would be completely errant. But what really impressed me, we talked about it after that game, was how he fared under pressure in that final drive. He led him to victory, and Jason Owe and Shaka Toney in his face every single play, and the dude was getting absolutely wrecked. I mean, these offensive tackles, to kind of put it in you and Dr. Eric Eager's words, kind of cheeks. They're dead last in pass block grade in the FBS right now. They've allowed 8 sacks and hits in 2 games. That's not good. Mm-hmm. But he's still producing at a high level. We saw that last week against Rutgers. I mean, the dude has an incredible arms talent there. I think he is the next best thing. I mean, last year, I always said that everything that you want the quarterback position, he showed. I mean, his pocket presence, his accuracy, his arm strength, his mobility, you name it. We saw the mobility on that last play against Penn State that won him the game on that 2-point conversion. So I think he is the real deal. I think the play calling could be a little bit better because we're seeing it. We saw it in the Penn State game. We saw it last week in that first quarter. It was so conservative. You have to let him do what he does best, kind of like Sam Howell. Let him air it out. Let him throw the ball downfield because he's been pinpoint accurate over the course of his whole career, not looking at just that Penn State game.
And you're an Indiana guy. You're from Indiana. Or do you have rooting interest in the Hoosiers?
I mean, I love all Indiana teams. I'll root for Purdue. I'll wear a Purdue shirt any day of the week. I'll wear an IU shirt, Notre Dame.
Purdue's
Butler,
got good branding. I like their colors. I like what they do there.
Yeah, I do. It's a good campus too. But no, I really do think he is legit. The defense, I really like what Tom Allen is doing with the defense. You know, it's very diverse. You know, they were talking about how they disguise stuff. They have, I believe it's under 25% they do on every single coverage. So They're very diverse. I like what they're doing. That kind of makes me nervous, though, because they don't have a lot of significantly talented pieces besides Tywone Mullen, little brother of your Las Vegas Raiders, Trayvon Mullen, and little cousin of Lamar Jackson. He is going to be a stud too. But it's going to be interesting to see how Michael Penix fares with Kwity Paye and Aiden Hutchinson, because I think those two are going to have, Jason Owe, Shaka Toney type of monster days against these Indiana offensive tackles.
So Michael Penix Jr., a former dual threat quarterback, a 3-star recruit, 6'3", 218 pounds, has an 89.2 PFF grade so far this year, and has been, like you said, really impressive so far. And I think a guy to watch in this game. I think the battle, though, is the one you mentioned. Aiden Hutchinson and Kwity Paye, two draftable edge defenders. Kwity Paye could go in the first round, I think early in the first round, if he does run that 3-cone that he's supposed to run, like sub 6'5" or something ridiculous.
Are they going to get rid of the 3-cone, though?
Maybe they get rid of the 3-cone. Who knows? But the two tackles to name, Matthew Bedford and Caleb Jones, have earned sub 30.0 PFF pass blocking grades so far this year in the Big Ten. I think it could be ugly for Penix Jr. with Bedford and Caleb Jones going against a very good edge defender duo there at Michigan. Pac-12 is back. That's the next game we're going. ASU versus USC. The Sun Devils taking on the Trojans. First, two names to bring up here are two top 60 players on PFF's big board, both playing for USC. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Elijah Vera-Tucker, the guard for USC. Of those two prospects, who are you higher on? Obviously, Mike Renner, big fan of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Who do you like of those two?
Elijah Vera-Tucker, 100%. And I think he's going to play left tackle for him this year. I think he's going to kick over. It's not verified, but I love this man. He was the second highest graded Power 5 guard in 2019 in pass protection. Only lost 4 of 121 true pass sets. Mike said in the draft guide, which is great. I highly recommend you check that out at pff.com. He's got a lot of great nugs in there. He wins with consistency, not flash. So that's why I think we're kind of underrating him a little bit. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown potential. We think he's going to be a big breakout candidate. He made our top 25 wide receivers for that reason. But I like Elijah Vera-Tucker more, but I'm also high on Tyler Vaughns, that wide receiver. Incredible ball skills. I mean, he's had so many highlight reel snags at the sideline there. Ken Slovis, too. 2022 number 1 overall pick. Book it. I'm telling you.
Number 1 overall pick.
Yes.
Wow.
This guy's a stud. Kurt Warner worked with him in high school. He's his quarterback's coach. Came in immediately. The way he maneuvered the pocket and made plays, the long developing plays, was incredible. 90.1 PFF passing grade on throws that took 3 seconds after the snap to pass. That's higher than any other returning quarterback by 7 grading points.
Wow.
I think he could, if he cracks down on the fumbles and there's a few different times he locked in on that first read and fired it right in there, didn't even see defender break on the ball, gave him an interceptable ball. Those are two kind of things that you kind of see true freshmen struggle with. 93rd in turnover-worthy play rate, but the accuracy, it is stupid. Accuracy is king. He was the only one to challenge Joe Burrow last year in that category. I think Ken Slovis, going to be a star, 2022, number 1 overall pick.
Man, you're dropping the taste here, Trash. You're bringing the heat.
I'm feeling it. I had a lot of coffee this morning.
Elijah Vera-Tucker, if he does kick out to left tackle, I think that'd be good for his stock. Need to show that positional versatility. But also with Amon-Ra St. Brown, I know you kind of shit on him a little bit, for lack of a better word, because
I did not shit.
If you like Vera-Tucker over Brown, that's fine. Brown, I will say this: the concern is that he has not played a ton of outside receiver. He's had 749 snaps in the slot in 2019. Played even more slot in the year prior. Like, you just haven't seen him do it against single coverage concepts. But he is that freaky athlete. He's a St. Brown brother. Equinemius St. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You watch the documentary; those guys are freaks, literally built different. You hear their parents say, their diet and what they were doing as a workout regimen, all that stuff. He is a freakish athlete, and I think that's what those traits are. What you bank on a 6'1", 195 pounder. If he can play some outside receiver this year and show it against single coverage, I think you could start to get excited. However, I'm not taking this guy in the first round until I see it over and over again against top flight cornerbacks. And I just don't think you will. Not in the Pac-12, not against who they got this year. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is a better piece to bet on day 2, maybe developing better than what Equinemius St. Brown has done for the Green Bay Packers. But it's not something I really want to swing the bat on in the first round from what I've seen so far. That could change, but from what I've seen so far, I don't think he's a day 1 selection in 2021.
When you bring up Equinemius, it kind of gets me scared. I would rather not associate Amon-Ra with Equinemius, but also 3 names to watch. Arizona State, I really like. Ashari Crosswell, Jermaine Lowell, little scheme tweak on the defensive line, going to switch to 3-tech. He played really well at 3-tech, not on the edge last year. I think he's going to have a breakout year. Frank Darby, the wide receiver. If Jaden Daniels was accurate, this guy would be considered one of the best wide receivers in college football. But sadly, Jaden Daniels is not accurate, cannot produce big-time throws down the field, but he's a huge, big-time deep threat there and can get off press with ease. I'm telling you.
I didn't love Darby's tape, actually.
Really?
Some people are really high on Darby. I watched his 2019 tape. I wasn't a big fan. Watched all of his targets. I do agree that there were some missed targets down the field. I'm interested to see more tape of him this upcoming season. Florida versus Georgia. Next game, we're pivoting to the SEC. Georgia favored by 3.5. It starts with edge defenders here, and then the defensive backs is where I'd like to start. Azeez Ojulari is playing out of his mind this year, grading as one of the better edge defenders in college football. And Brenton Cox Jr. has shown some juice for Florida along the edge, one of the better defensive players for Florida this year. What has been your opinion of those two? And probably start with Ojulari.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Azeez Ojulari in this one because I think he and a lot of other pieces on this Georgia pass rush, Kirby Smart's going to have him getting after Kyle Trask. And I'm looking forward to seeing that pass rush go to work, but I'm more looking forward to seeing how Trask handles that pass rush because Kirby Smart's a defensive mastermind there. I think, he's been exceptional. I'm kind of pivoting the conversation here, but this is my key thing in this game. He's converting pressure to sacks at an astronomically low rate. Trask, that is. Well, far lower than we've seen him last year, 9.8% right now, which is the second best in the SEC. He's keeping his eyes downfield, when under pressure, maneuvering the pocket well, but he's still kind of making those little rash decisions that you were just kind of shake your head at when under duress that we saw a lot last year. So I think this is the game we find out who Kyle Trask really is. And I think next week I'll be able to say whether or not I was right or wrong on Kyle Trask based off of this game alone because of this Georgia defense, because it's one of the best, if not the best in college football. We saw what they did to Bo Nix a few weeks ago. I mean, they destroyed Bo Nix. So I think this is going to be a really key game for Kyle Trask. Also, Brenton Cox, you mentioned. I'm looking forward to seeing him go up against Jamari Salyer. I had higher hopes for Salyer. I thought he was going to be a huge breakout guy, possibly one of the best tackles in the SEC, but he hasn't quite been that in pass protection. So I think could be a big game for Brenton Cox.
Yeah, I'm excited for Brenton Cox to look at Azeez Ojulari, who's kind of been a breakout candidate this year. 6'3", 240 pounds, has earned an 86.0 PFF grade and an 85.8 PFF pass rushing grade. Already 21 total pressures on the year. Grade significantly improved from his 2019 season. Excited for him to go in this game. A couple more names I'll mention. We got to move a little bit quickly here. Look at some other games. But in the secondary, there's some talent. Tyson Campbell, former 5-star recruit there at Georgia, who has had some success against some big name receivers. Kyrie Elam, the Florida cornerback that we highlighted as a breakout candidate, a guy that I think is grading above 70 right now. And Eric Stokes Jr., who, former track athlete, has the speed, but I'm telling you, man, these Georgia defensive backs coach these guys to bully dudes down the field. And he gets caught with a lot of defensive pass interferences, despite having better speed and maybe enough speed to stick with these guys downfield. I'd like to see him use his hands less. I think he can match and mirror and be sticky without using his hands. Eric Stokes Jr. was a guy I liked, but the more I watch this tape, the more I feel like he's relying on his hands, and that didn't pan out for DeAndre Baker, and I mean for other reasons too. But I don't think you can get away with what Georgia gets away with, specifically at the cornerback position in the NFL. Excited to see more tape on him. Obviously, Florida loaded on the offensive side of the ball. We've talked about Kadarius Toney, Kyle Pitts, and Trask ad nauseum. Should be a fun one to watch. Georgia again only favored by 3.5 in that game. Quite the opposite line here. OSU versus Rutgers. I think Ohio State's favored by 28 in this game, somewhere along that line. But similar to Michigan, similar to UNC. I think they're must-watch football every single week if you are a big NFL draft fan, for the reasons that Chris Olave, potential first-rounder. Garrett Wilson, not eligible for this draft, but maybe a future first-rounder. I love what this guy's putting on tape. And also Shaun Wade, a guy we talked about a ton on on Monday's podcast.
Yeah, I think Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson are going to have huge games this weekend because Rutgers plays a lot of press man. I think they're going to have their way with that secondary. For me personally, with Shaun Wade's not going to face a tough set of wide receivers anymore the rest of the season. I'm not valuing the rest of his Big Ten slate unless it's either really, really good or really, really bad. I'm looking forward to that college football playoff. Hopefully we see him against those Bama wide receivers. I think we're going to find out a lot about Shaun Wade then. I don't know if you kind of feel the same way. Like how much are you valuing this type of game for Shaun Wade and just really the rest of the season, because the Big Ten has some good receivers, but they're not facing any of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Shaun Wade, The production is going to be interesting this year. I mean, you did not see a good game for him against Penn State. He allowed the inside release a little bit too easy against Jahan Dotson, got bullied at the catch point. I've admitted it on the Monday podcast. I thought the one-handed catch by Dotson was a bit of an OPI, but still, Wade is going to make his money at the combine and with the freaking logo on his helmet. That's how Shaun Wade is going to be valued in this class. I'm telling you that right now. I also think he could get an invite to the Senior Bowl, permitting that we do have one in 2021. I think Shaun Wade, there's a chance that he runs a fast 40. There's a chance he cuts it up on the 3-cone. You just haven't seen the production, though, at outside corner. I don't think you will if Ohio State makes the playoff. And I know we talked about this before before we started the podcast episode here. If he goes against Alabama and you can see him against Devontae Smith, and obviously you won't see him against Jalen Waddle, but even John Mechie, I think that would be a very telling performance for him, because if he can stick with those guys, you could start to feel a little bit more confident. From what I've seen, I don't know if he does, but I think that would be a very big game to circle on your calendars if Ohio State does get the opportunity to play Alabama in the college football playoff. All right, last game on the college slate, then we'll pivot to the NFL. It's the game of the week. It's a monster game on NBC. It was supposed to be a bigger game with Trevor Lawrence playing, but he will not be in due to COVID. I don't know how to pronounce the new quarterback, Clemson's quarterback's last name, but I'll call him DJ, true freshman. He'll be going against Notre Dame. Notre Dame only 5.5-point dogs. I think this one could be a blowout. I'm ready to back up the Brinks truck and bet on DJ, Travis Etienne, and Clemson. Am I wrong to think that? Am I wrong to think that Ian Book and Notre Dame can't keep this close?
Yeah, I mean, well, Seth decided that we're referring to DJ kind of like Madonna, Beyonce. It's a one-name basis with him because of that last name. But I'm siding with you because I do not trust Ian Book with the ball in his hands at all whatsoever. The passing attack has been efficient, but when he's throwing downfield, it's been ugly. And he has the best offensive line in college football, has not been able to take advantage of it. So I think I would roll with Clemson in this one by quite a bit.
Yeah, I talked to George Chahuri, who in addition to working as the content director here at PFF, does a ton of things for NBC, Sunday Night Football, and obviously this game on NBC. They go through a lot of information, a lot of data and packets sent to these broadcasters, and he says every single page, Ian Book does not look like the quarterback that's going to be able to cover the spread. I do not think Notre Dame covers the spread. It's going to be interesting to see where this number ends up. You're probably going to see a lot of betting on Saturday, but it's at 5.5 right now. Consider that while we move forward. Some prospects to name here: the entire Notre Dame offensive line, including Liam Eichenberg, the left tackle. Tommy Tremble. I don't know how much of Tremble you've watched, the tight end there for Notre Dame. I think he has some juice. Again, I talk about this tight end class highly. I think Tremble's another name that day 2, day 3 is worth a flyer.
I don't talk about run blocking much with tight ends, but his run blocking,
it's good. And he's got good feet. I think he's got good hands. He's got good functional strength. Like Tommy Tremble also makes plays after the catch. A name to watch there for Notre Dame, the tight end. And then on the Clemson side, you obviously have Travis Etienne, Jackson Carman, two names that a lot of people have talked about for Clemson. And defensively, the Joker, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Kyle Hamilton, who's an underclassman, but a stud when he is healthy. And on Clemson's side, the secondary, Darion Kendrick, Mike Jones Jr., Andrew Booth Jr., not all draft eligible, but those guys, very, very talented on the back end. I know you're a huge fan of Clemson's secondary.
Yeah, Darion Kendrick. I'm looking a little bit for a bounce back game. Gave up one big touchdown last week. So I want him to see, I think he's going to put the clamps on again this week like we saw the first few weeks of the year. He's pretty high on our big board right now. I think he's going to have a performance that sticks him there, and I think he'll have that for the rest of the year.
All right, that's it for the college football slate. I mean, this sounds like a really good week. I don't know what you're doing Saturday, but we might have to get together because I think there's a lot of fun games to watch. Get it done at the studio apartment there. Moving to the NFL, Thursday night game, Packers at 49ers. There's a couple players I wanted to bring up. Brandon Ayuk going against the Green Bay secondary, including Jair Alexander, who is PFF's highest graded cornerback in the NFL right now, and second-year player Elgton Jenkins for the Green Bay Packers, who has developed into one of the better, young offensive linemen in the NFL right now. Isn't having quite the season he had last year, but still a very stable piece for Green Bay. Start with Brandon Ayuk. Do you think he has a back-to-back weeks of impressive performance, especially with George Kittle out now? George Kittle out, the targets have to go somewhere. Dante Pettis released, the former second-round pick out of Washington. I think Ayuk could start to see 8+ targets a game, maybe get into that 10-target conversation. Fantasy community getting a little excited. I'm starting to get interested. What's your take on Brandon Ayuk?
For sure. I like that. I'm sure we'll probably have the prop king on Sunday. George Chahuri getting some Brandon Ayuk props in there, the overs. But yeah, I agree. He's been, I was not expecting much from him. He's definitely surprised me. But yeah, I agree. I think he's going to be, with all the injuries, he's going to be the featured guy in this offense. I mean, you might as well at this point. Because I don't know. I'm curious to see, how the 49ers really feel about their team moving forward right now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, everyone's so... I feel like it's been a very big trend, and this is a little bit of a tangent, a trend in the NFL right now for fan bases on teams where they're starting to lose early in the season. It's like, oh, we got to tank. We got to tank. We got to tank. Oh, Atlanta needs to tank for Trevor. New England needs to tank for Trevor. San Francisco, oh man, Jimmy G and Kittle's out. We need to tank. Okay, if everyone's tanking, no one's tanking. You know, at a certain point, like not everyone's going to be able to tank for the first or second overall pick. And if you're not picking there, you're in a tier below in quarterbacks, in my opinion. I think even Justin Fields might be a little bit of a tier below Trevor Lawrence. You know, the San Francisco 49ers are not in a position to tank and get a top flight quarterback in this class. I think you're going to see 3 quarterbacks go in the top 5, and you could see 4 go in the top 10. That's how good this class is. If you can't get inside those picks, you're going to have to trade up a ton. The price is going to be huge to trade up in this class too because of the quarterback position, who's available. I'm really interested to see how it pans out, but you just can't tank. And I know the San Francisco 49ers aren't going to tank. I think they're not going to play great football down the stretch. Could sneak in as the 7th seed in the NFC. We'll see how it goes. Elgton Jenkins going to bring him up here, 6'5", 311 pounds, the second-year guard out of Mississippi State, has a 67.4 overall grade so far this year, playing well, specifically in pass protection, a 74.9 pass blocking grade for Elgton Jenkins. All right, jumping to Seahawks-Bills. There's only one name I want to bring up. One matchup I want to bring up, and it's DK Metcalf. You call him a top 5 receiver on the Monday show, the second-year receiver out of Ole Miss. He's taking over the NFL. He's taking over Instagram. He's taking over TikTok. TikTokers, the average age on TikTok is like, what, 11? Your kind of audience? DK Metcalf is everyone's favorite football player right now. Can he get it done against Trey White? Do you continue to see him roll?
Yes, I think he gets it done against every single cornerback in the NFL. He's that good. I thought you were going to say Ed Oliver versus Damian Lewis in there, which I think could be a bad matchup for the rookie.
Yeah, I think Lewis might lose that one. Yeah. Ed Oliver's been good this year. I've been impressed.
The pass rushing has been on point the last couple of weeks. But yeah, I think DK Metcalf, he's going to have his way here. You know, a couple weeks ago didn't have the best of games, but I think this time around, I'm taking him. You know, George Shurry said it, wide receiver 1 in a redraft. I'm right there with him.
Man, Bills 2.5-point dogs at home against Seattle, and DK Metcalf, the engine for the Seattle Seahawks. All right, Panthers at Chiefs. Chiefs favored by 10.5. Brian Burns, I think, is the highest graded second-year defensive player in the NFL, and one of the highest graded edge defenders in the NFL, has really shined as a pass rusher, but it's been in bursts. It has not been a pass rush win rate type of success for him, like similar to what TJ Watt has done or what Myles Garrett has done. He has not been consistently dominant, but when he wins, he's been winning emphatically. Strip sacks, clear wins on the edge. I've been a huge fan of Brian Burns. I think he's that change of pace edge defender you want. Peter Bukowski speaks to that in the interview later. He has speed off the edge that puts offensive tackles in a bind. Really excited to see him go against Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz. What has been your opinion of Brian Burns this season so far this year? Are you on the hype train that is Brian Burns?
You know, I am. Before the season, I was not at all whatsoever. But man, you know, what was it last week? You're talking about the spin move he had on Donovan Smith. That's been one of my favorite plays this year. Last week we saw he's putting offensive tackles in the spin cycle. I think he had 3.
His spin move is his calling card. That's his counter. He doesn't have a bull counter. He doesn't have a speed to power. His counter to the speed is the spin, and it works.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I don't think he's on that even remotely close to that TJ Watt level. I think he's a clear, second tier pass rusher right now, but 90.6 pass rush grade through 8 games. That's pretty good for a second year guy. And you mentioned it is coming through strip sack, so it's kind of weighted with that, 3 forced fumbles on the year. But I've been really impressed despite that, assuming like he didn't force those fumbles and those were just, basic pressures. He still exceeded my expectations.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire is another name to mention, specifically for the fantasy community. Clyde Edwards-Helaire RB1 season is over. RB2 season in fantasy might even be over. He is not seeing the snap rate since Le'Veon Bell came over. I think his snap rate since Le'Veon Bell has been signed is under 40%, might be under 45% is a better number there. Had a really strong start to the season. Is still forcing missed tackles at a high rate compared to other backs, but I still don't see him now with Le'Veon Bell added to the mix being this feature piece in Kansas City. Are they wrong to be giving Le'Veon Bell the carries and the lion's share of the snaps?
They were wrong to take Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first round to begin with. I mean, why would you do this? I mean, you kind of just going against what you did and what you committed to. Kind of, I think we're gonna again look back on this and think it was I like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think he's a phenomenal. We talked about this. If you're playing running back in the NFL, you're obviously a stupid athlete. You're really good at what you do. But I think we're going to look back at this down the road and say this was kind of a wasted draft pick.
I mean, I had a conversation. I was on a Kansas City radio hit. I do it weekly. He was talking about, well, I'd rather have Clyde Edwards-Helaire because he's performing well. You compare it to the cornerback class, even the linebackers are not grading well, making mistakes. I was like, buddy, you're not just drafting for this year, and you have to think about the positional value and where, if Clyde Edwards-Helaire is even a top 15 running back over the course of his rookie contract, the Panthers are getting that from Mike Davis. The Seahawks are getting that from DJ Dallas. Like, you're going to get it from other positions. You're better off swinging the bat on a high-octane athlete at a position of high value. Corner, wide receiver, even backup quarterback at this point, it can be more valuable than the running back position. I still think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a good running back. We had the take on the Monday episode. All the running backs in the NFL are very good. Some of the worst ones are just a little bit long in the tooth. And Todd Gurley, Ezekiel Elliott is one you mentioned on the Monday episode. Adrian Peterson, Frank Gore. The guys that are playing well right now are the ones with juice. Brian Hill showing juice in Atlanta. DJ Dallas for Seattle. Justin Jackson in Los Angeles. Mike Davis, a little bit long in the tooth, but still, he's performing well for Carolina. All right, Lions at Vikings. Wanted to preview this game. Vikings favored by 4. A lot of rookies in this one. Jeffrey Okudah, Cameron Dantzler, if he's healthy, and Jeff Gladney, all rookie cornerbacks that will play in this game. And then Justin Jefferson, one of the highest graded receivers in football. Didn't have a great week this past week. Could have a bounce back week against what has been an underperforming Detroit Lions defense. Let's start there. Where do you see Justin Jefferson ending up? What's the stat line this week?
Yeah, I didn't think he had a great game last week because of Kirk Cousins. I mean,
fair, and they didn't throw the ball a ton.
Yeah, a little limited there, but I think Justin Jefferson's going to put up big numbers. He had in weeks 3, 4, and 6, if I recall correctly, he had 3 of the 8 best single games we've ever recorded by a rookie wide receiver. I think he might even have another game like that against this Detroit secondary. And I'm kind of nervous for Jeff Okudah going up these types of route runners. We saw what Devontae Adams did to him. I know that was his first game, but I think it's going to be. I think these Minnesota receivers are going to have a big game.
Cameron Dantzler and Jeff Gladney. Dantzler, I think, is coming off the COVID list or an injury if they both play in this game. Just excited to see more tape. Cameron Dantzler, I think, has allowed more yards per coverage snap than any cornerback in the NFL so far this season. I think you'd like to see him bounce back. And Jeff Gladney, well, I think he's played well in run support. He's shown that same tenacity that he showed at TCU, is still struggling a bit against some of the better receivers in the NFL. But that is a broken record for the rookie corners in the NFL right now. Chicago Bears at Tennessee Titans is the next game we'll preview. Titans favored by 5.5 at home. Jalen Johnson, another rookie cornerback that has been playing surprisingly well compared to some of the other guys, has played well for Chicago, going against A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. How do you see this matchup faring?
Yeah, I'm really, really excited about this because one of my favorite young cornerbacks and one of my favorite young wide receivers, Jalen Johnson, A.J. Brown, they're going to be matched up more than any in this one. I really think Jalen Johnson's going to be, I mentioned it on Monday, I think he might be the best cornerback in this draft class. And when we look back on it in a few years, he's had incredible ball production, like what we saw at Utah. And, it kind of goes back to, I remember you interviewing him talking about his tape study and how much he watches tape and his instincts. And we'll talk about it a little bit later with Peter, how much do you want to be great? I mean, this guy wants to be the best, you can tell. So I think Jalen Johnson's going to be a stud down the road, and I think he will be in this one. It's going to be tough for him. It's going to be really tough. It's hard for me to say which one's going to come on top because I love them both a lot. But I think Jalen Johnson's going to mostly have the wins in this one against A.J. Brown.
Yeah, Jalen Johnson, I would encourage you to go back and check out that episode of 2-4 Drafts. Also interviewed him on social. Dude's a stud. Dude's a very, very a tape grinder in every sense of the word, very coverage versatile in the schemes he can play, and he's showing that. And I think that has been super important for the rookies that are performing well. Guys that did study a ton of tape, that didn't completely rely on their athleticism, because in the NFL, it gets a lot faster. The game gets more confusing, more complex, more diverse from a schematic standpoint. Jalen Johnson was ready for that, and he's shown that for Chicago. Another name I want to mention in this game, a second-year player that we didn't see a ton of as a rookie, is Jeffrey Simmons, the defensive tackle that I think fell in the draft largely due to an injury coming out in 2019. Still ended up being a first-round pick at 19th overall. So far this year, an 81.8 PFF grade, dominated against Minnesota's weak interior offensive line, had 7 pressures in that game, and has 18 pressures on the year. Interested to see him go against Chicago, who themselves have a very bad interior offensive line. They've allowed a ton of pressure on the interior.
It's going to get even worse, too. Is Jermaine Ifedi, he believe he's on the COVID list, or he's close contact, so he might...
Jason Spriggs is on the COVID list,
yeah,
too.
So he was in close contact. He might be out on this one. We are not sure yet, but yeah, with Rashad Coward, too, I think he has another game like he did.
It could be a dominant game for Jeffrey Simmons. Three more games we'll mention on the NFL side, and then we'll jump to the Peter Bukowski interview. Giants at Washington football team. Football team favored by 3. A lot of first-year and second-year players to watch in this game. I mean, they're both young teams. They're both young, bad football teams. Chase Young going against Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas has allowed a higher pressure rate than any offensive tackle in the NFL, has really struggled in his transition to the NFL, going against Chase Young, who I believe right now is the highest-graded defensive rookie in the NFL. How do you see this going? I think Chase Young could have a field day against Andrew Thomas, but maybe it's closer than people think.
Yeah, I mean, he is the highest graded rookie on the defense side of the ball by a lot. He was the only one on the defense side of the ball to make our top 10 rookies list for this week, and it's kind of been that way. When you're looking at how he fared a few weeks ago, that was one of his better games against the Giants. I think he's going to have a career day. We might see an elite performance out of him just because it's just been really bad, really bad for him. So I think Chase Young's going to have a monstrous day. And, you know, the fact that he's still a top 10 graded edge defender despite week 3, went out early with that injury, came back in week 5, did not look the best, and had a kind of a poor game there. Is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, surprising no one, Chase Young has been, exceeding expectations for a lot of people, but he's also battled injuries, which I feel like his season could even be better if he was not having that issue. Antonio Gibson, the rookie running back out of Memphis for Washington, has forced missed tackles at a high rate. I think he's been one of the more productive rookie running backs in the NFL this year. And 2 second-year players I'll mention. Terry McLaurin, still in his bag, one of the better young route runners in the NFL, has performed really well on a much more short and intermediate target volume. His average depth of target has dropped down a bit. He's shown a little bit more after the catch. I've been impressed with his versatility and how much his game has changed even this year. And Dexter Lawrence, who he's got some of the best tape against the run this year of any defensive tackle in the NFL. Like, I think he is that hoss. If we know one thing, I think I saw Arif Hassan of The Athletic tweet this out. There's one thing we know about the New York Giants. They have some nose tackles. They have some defensive tackles that can play ball. I'm pretty sure when I was looking at graphics for the Sunday live show this week, among the 5 highest graded Giants, I think 3 of them are defensive tackles. And Dexter Lawrence is right up there.
And they're still bad.
Defensive tackle, you want to talk positional value. I'll tell you right now, having Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, and Devon Hamilton grading really well for you is not going to lead to a ton of dubs. You need Daniel Jones to throw the football away and not give up so many picks.
I've been kind of impressed with Daniel Jones, though. Just
Same.
a little bit.
And I had this comment in the Discord, PFF Discord, which is free for everyone to join. I definitely encourage you to find that and join it. But Daniel Jones has been surprisingly okay this year. He's made some mistakes. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, but he's been okay. However, I still feel like his concerns are enough to feel good about taking Justin Fields if the Giants are drafting 2, which I think there's a good chance they are.
It's like Jameis Light.
It's Jameis Light. Speaking of Jameis, Saints versus Bucks. Jameis Winston revenge game. It's the Jameis Winston revenge game if Drew Brees does get hurt. The name I wanted to bring up here, we don't have to spend too much time on this game, Bucks favored by 5.5, is Jamel Dean. I think he got exposed a bit on Monday night. They were going after him on double moves and those types of things, trying to get after Jamel Dean, a guy that's graded well this year. I think he's still playing well above expectation from a pre-draft evaluation standpoint, but you are seeing some of those concerns you saw at Alabama. Overly aggressive. When asked to flip his hips, can kind of struggle. Where are you with Jamel Dean?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen more good than bad, so I still
absolutely
think,
okay. Yeah. Of course, that sounded really negative, but a lot of people talking
throwing
about
him under the bus, putting him in a body bag there. But no, I still think he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, which is pretty impressive considering he was a 3rd-round pick last year. And in that first game, DK Metcalf, who's just absolutely torched him that game. He has recovered nicely, but yeah, it really was not that great of a game for him against the Giants. 37.8 coverage grade, still only allowed 34 yards in coverage, which granted, for some cornerbacks, that would be a win. That's like, hey, I had a good game there, but he did, on a few catches, get exposed there. So I'm not putting too much stock into that. I've seen more good games from him than bad. So I'm still rolling with Jamel Dean, but also Antoine Winfield. I've been kind of impressed with him. It's kind of showed that a lot of teams underrated him in the pre-draft process. I kept waiting for him to go earlier than he did. I was like, there's no way this team can pass on him. No way this team can pass on him. Tampa falls in his laps. Guy's looking like the heat-seeking missile that Mike Renner would love to comp him to in the pre-draft process.
I mean, Antoine Winfield Jr., the reason he falls, injuries were insane at Minnesota. Yeah. I mean, the guy was had 2 or 3 injury red shirts. Yeah. And then in addition to that, he's small and not a burner. I mean, I think it's bad process to take those guys in the first round. I think it's bad process to take those guys in the top 50, regardless of how successful the tape is, the NFL bloodlines, etc. However, those are the guys you swing the bat on, though, when you get into the 2nd and 3rd round, when you see that production and feel confident in injuries maybe regressing or whatever it may be. Antoine Winfield Jr., I said it a couple days ago, I think, to someone, defensive rookie of the year. I think Patrick Queen could get it because he's going to get all the tackles and the easy stats
That'd
there.
be a
But
shame.
I think Antoine Winfield Jr. is having a higher impact on the wins and higher impact in Tampa Bay right now. I think he's playing lights out football. Last game, this is the Monday night game, an absolute barn burner, I'm sure. It's going to be super exciting. Everyone's going to be interested. New England Patriots are going against the New York Jets. Jets only 7-point dogs at home against the Patriots. Two names we'll bring up. Quinnen Williams, who I think has had an outstanding year relative to the expectation this year. He's bounced back from what was a underwhelming rookie year, battled injuries as well. And he might see our guy, Michael Onwenu, the highest graded rookie in all of football and one of the highest graded offensive linemen. If he plays tackle again, which I think there is a chance he does, you won't see a ton of Quinnen Williams. But if he gets kicked back inside, we could see the big man go against Quinnen.
Yeah, that's going to be an exciting one. I kind of think the Jets might win this one.
Whoa.
I think they might.
You think the Jets might win? Talk to me how.
So you heard Bill Belichick's comments. There's part of me that thinks they might. You're talking about tanking. The Niners. I don't know anyone saying like. Well, I don't understand why anyone would say that Niners should tank. I think they're better than that. But the Patriots, on the other hand, they're kind of in a prime position here. If they lose this one, they're sitting pretty to get one of those top quarterbacks. And I think Bill Belichick is smart enough to realize that. This is a hot take, maybe. Hopefully we see Michael Onwenu and Quinnen Williams.
My take here, though, is that if the New England Patriots lose this football game, the conspiracy that Bill Belichick threw this game to try and get a better chance at the #1 overall pick I think would skyrocket. I think people would talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're going to lose a game, if you're going to throw a game, throw it against the Jets. Give them a dub. Make it a lot more interesting to get the #1 overall pick or either #2 overall pick. I'm interested in it. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. I don't think Bill Belichick is going into this game going to throw a game. That would be just absurd in the NFL.
I don't think so either. But I think the Patriots will win. But I would not be surprised. I think there's a higher chance the Jets come away with this than we think.
How bad would that be for the Jets, though? I've said this multiple times. The worst thing the Jets could do right now is win a football game. If you win a football game against the New England Patriots at home to let Bill Belichick enter the conversation for Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, that is otherworldly bad. Like, that is so bad for you and the future of you in the division. I really don't hope that's the case. I think the New York Jets.
I don't either. I think the Jets, for that fan base's sake, they need to lose this game. Because I could not even imagine being a Jets fan right now.
It's such an. It's an interesting conversation. I would be really surprised if New England Patriots lose this game. But if they lose this game, I think it would ultimately be better for their chances at grabbing a quarterback and terrible for the New York Jets. We'll finish on that. Jets winning, being terrible. Tony, always good stuff to have you on the podcast. We're not going to end right here. We are kicking to Peter Bukowski, an interview with him, a guy who covers the Packers on Locked On Packers. We talk Will Fuller, the trade that didn't happen. Talk Rashawn Gary a little bit, Jair Alexander, Josh Jackson, the development there, Gutekunst's decision in April's draft. A lot of fun stuff. Let's jump to the interview. Joining the 2-for-1 Drafts podcast is Peter Bukowski here with me and Anthony Treash on 2-for-1 Drafts. We are recording right now, 24 minutes outside of the trade deadline. And I'm glad to have you on, man, because you obviously cover the Packers there with Locked On, among others. Excuse me. But Will Fuller, it was a done deal. I heard it was a done deal on Monday. Now it's a little bit shakier. What is going on with Will Fuller right now? I think that's where we have to open, Peter.
Yeah, and of course, by the time this goes out, we'll know if he was moved or wasn't moved. But I had also heard that this was something I don't know about done, but agreed to in principle. Like there's some different ways that, of course, you can phrase it, and whether it was the Packers or the Texans, again, I don't have it solidly enough to report it, so I don't want to speculate. But clearly, Green Bay wanted to make a move. They called on Zach Ertz. And they wanted to make a splash in the draft. They have this weird idea, though, that if they can't get someone who really moves the needle, then they're sort of just fine to stand pat. And I know a lot of Packer fans don't agree with that. I don't agree with that because we've seen enough from guys like Darius Shepard and Malik Taylor and even Marquez Valdes-Scantling to know that those guys just aren't good enough. And sometimes in a Super Bowl or in an NFC Championship game, you need that receiver 3 to come up for 3 catches for 65 yards in a big spot. And all of a sudden, that's the difference between beating the Seahawks or the Bucks.
I agree. And I think there's an opportunity potentially that we react to a trade or a no trade in real time. But because this is coming out, I think Wednesday night or Thursday morning, let's react to right now. What would Will Fuller mean for this Green Bay Packers offense? If he was traded for, what would he mean for this offense? How much does this make Aaron Rodgers and company better in 2020?
Yeah, I know that PFF Mike is not here, but I was talking to Mike off the air about it. And it's just such a perfect fit in terms of what Green Bay needs. The geometry of their offense just works so much better with someone like Will Fuller. And it doesn't have to be Will Fuller. Hell, it could be Kenny Stills. It could be, this is why the Packer fans were so hot and bothered for John Ross. Someone with speed who can open up the middle of the field, not just for Davante Adams or, Allen Lazard when he gets back healthy, but now all of a sudden the tight ends are starting to make plays. Jay Sternberger, we saw against the Vikings, has some juice down the field. And actually, this was from Ian Hartitz. If you look at most yards per target this year with at least 25 targets, Robert Tonyan is 5th on that list. Behind guys like Justin Jefferson, McCole Hardman, Julio Jones, and
real
DK
speedsters.
Metcalf, ahead of Chase Claypool. I mean, that's wild. So they have some of these other players. If you get someone who is a legitimate threat down the field, it fundamentally shot plays. They want to be able to go hard play action and take shots down the field. And they just don't trust Marquez Valdes-Scantling to be that guy.
For me, I think right now the Packers are a clear tier below Tampa Bay and Seattle. But adding Will Fuller, I think they're in the Super Bowl conversation. I think they could be viewed as the favorites to come out of the NFC. That's just me, but I think that's how much. I'd be willing to give up a good haul for him because I think he gives you the best chance to win this season.
And I think too, Bucky Brooks has said this before, and I'm huge on board with this, is build your receiving core like a basketball team. You have to have different guys that can do different skill sets, like similar to what the Buffalo Bills have done with Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs, and John Brown. Guys that can threaten downfield, pure route runners, and underneath stick movers. And I think the Green Bay Packers, they don't have a basketball team at all. I mean, there's one guy. It is one guy that is excelling there in Green Bay. Obviously, Davante Adams. They're adding a piece like Will Fuller. The Houston Rockets, exactly. Adding a piece like Will Fuller makes this closer to a basketball team. You have Davante Adams, who is a stick mover, a pure route runner, and then you add Will Fuller, who has made Deshaun Watson a lot better. You look at EPA splits for Deshaun Watson with Will Fuller and without Will Fuller on the football field. It's completely different. It stretches the defense out, does a ton of different things. I want to stay on the wide receiver conversation a little bit and talk specifically about the draft. April's draft, everyone said Green Bay needs to attack the wide receiver position. Did you see Green Bay, their clear-cut position of need, be the wide receiver position, or were you thinking other things? Because I think everyone wanted Green Bay to take a receiver. Even Aaron Rodgers admitted that he was hoping to get some help there. Was that the clear-cut need for them, or did we overlook that?
So I've argued with a lot of people about this, about the word need. I don't like the word need. I don't think Green Bay needed a receiver. You think about how good the Saints offense was last year with Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and Drew Brees. If you think Aaron Jones is really good, and I do, and you think Davante Adams is really good, and by your grading, he's the best receiver in football this year, and you think Aaron Rodgers is really good, by the way, the second highest graded quarterback in the league this year, then that's a pretty good offense, right? So did they need someone else? No, but I think of need in terms of the player who can most impact your team. That's the guy that I want to take. And it's not just in year one, it's over the course of their rookie contract and potentially beyond. When I looked at this team, receiver was that position because of the receiver's value and what they can create. I mean, you guys have done a lot of work on WAR and the value of receivers. I think, if someone like a Brandon Ayuk, who we're just seeing now, is a baller, had been available, he is a no-brainer. What happened is things got a little out of whack for Green Bay, and they made no secret about it. They wanted to take a receiver. They wanted to make an addition, but they felt like if it wasn't one of those top guys, that they were content to roll with their developmental guys, Darius Shepard, MVS, and Equinemius St. Brown, who we haven't mentioned here yet, and who is dealing with the knee injury and so hasn't really had many opportunities on the field so far. And what opportunities he's had, he's dropped, basically. They went into the draft, and their top tier, according to them anyway, just went. They disappeared. if you read the tea leaves, San Francisco jumped Green Bay to draft Brandon Ayuk. I think those are the last two players in their tier. They really liked Brandon Ayuk and they really liked Jordan Love. And by the way, they really like Jordan Love. Whatever anyone says about Jordan Love, that's their evaluation. That's fine. Green Bay loved this kid and still loves this kid. And in the second, I think things just broke for them a little weird. Brian Gutekunst told Peter King they had another group of guys in a tier below that they were hoping to get up for. And once the last guy in that tier went, they just sort of felt like all the rest of these guys are really dice rolls, and we feel like we have enough dice rolls on our team. Whether or not that was a smart decision is a separate thing, but that was their thought process. And the two names that I think you can point to in terms of that next tier, Michael Pittman and Chase Claypool. Those are the guys that I think they had their eyes on. And once they go, then because Green Bay could have moved up to take Denzel Mims if they wanted to. They could have moved up to take Van Jefferson if they wanted to. They didn't. So I think they felt like that was where the cutoff was. And so then they attacked these other positions of supposed need. I think there's plenty of questions to be asked about positional value in terms of how they address day two, but that's their thinking in terms of what they felt like would most benefit their team.
So looking ahead at next year's draft class, the 2021, it might even be better than this past year's. Let's say hypothetically Green Bay, they fall short, they don't make the NFC Championship game, and it kind of looks like they're a one wide receiver short or away. Do you think that they will, automatically that first pick come next April, take a wide receiver and commit to that?
I think it's going to depend on a lot of factors. What does that look like? What happens in the NFC Championship game or the divisional game or whenever they ultimately lose? I mean, the Green Bay is not going to overreact to that, but I think it matters in a number of different ways. You think about what happened in the NFC Championship game. Green Bay gets steamrolled by Raheem Mostert and Kyle Shanahan. They didn't take a linebacker until the 5th round. They didn't take a defensive lineman. They did not say we need to beat the 49ers, which I think is smart because, by the way, if the Packers do beat the B team 49ers on Thursday, their season is hanging by a thread given their record and their upcoming schedule. I don't know if you guys have looked at their upcoming schedule, but it's brutal. And 9-7 with their injuries would be a great finish. So I think Green Bay, they could help themselves in that way. If they finish the season losing 35-42 against the Seahawks, are they going to feel like they were one receiver short? Maybe, maybe not. They have some questions at other positions because they don't have a long-term right tackle. What's the future of David Bakhtiari? What are they going to do with Kevin King? Is Josh Jackson playing well enough for him to be the future there? And if he is, do they have a third guy behind, on the boundary anyway? Is Kadar Holman that guy, or do they need to get a cornerback? And then what do they do with the outside linebackers? What do they do at safety? Adrian Amos could be a cap casualty. Preston Smith could be a cap casualty. Billy Turner could be a cap casualty. I mean, there's a lot of flux. If anything, that's another reason for the Packers to say, let's go try and make this work.
I agree. I think it's always too early to identify need. And I think you brought up a good point there too, in that it's hard to call it a need when you're as good as Green Bay Packers. I don't think it was a clear-cut need. And I also hate, and Steve Palazzolo has said this, everyone has kind of said this at PFF, I hate drafting for need in any draft. It rarely pans out. New York Giants drafted for need at tackle, and Andrew Thomas is like one of the worst tackles in the NFL right now. Oftentimes you don't see rookie offensive linemen pan out early. Would they have been better off attacking a wide receiver to add to that unit? Who knows? I think drafting for need more often than not does not result in positive results there. I want to pivot off the receiver conversation. It's easy to talk Will Fuller all day, and we're reacting to this live. If Will Fuller gets traded, we're going to get on that. But I want to talk Rashawn Gary, a guy that PFF wasn't really high on compared to some of the other draft analysts when he was coming out. Now in his second year with Green Bay, how do you feel Rashawn Gary is developing there? And what do you think the front office's opinion and the coach's opinion of Rashawn Gary's development is right now?
All of those are very different. So I think we have to keep that in mind. The Packers, they loved Rashawn Gary starting very early in the process. Starting at the combine, they zeroed in on him as their guy. And I don't think it was just the workout. Outside linebackers coach Mike Smith, who worked with D Ford in Kansas City, said that Rashawn Gary was the best edge rusher in the draft as a prospect. Remember who else was in that draft?
Yes.
Nick Bosa, Brian Burns, Montez Sweat. I mean, a lot of really good players, and they liked Rashawn Gary the best. At least Mike Smith did. Part of that is Mike Pettin likes big edge players. So I think that sort of, took Brian Burns out of the equation a little bit, an undersized outside linebacker, even though I think in terms of diversity of skill set, we talked about trying to create a basketball team. He kind of would have been the perfect complement to someone like Zadarius Smith and Kenny Clark and those guys. But he was an inconsistent player as a rookie, and that's putting it mildly. He would, overrun the quarterback. He didn't show a lot of flexibility or looseness. He was a hustle player, which is great because you need hustle players. And he was, as he was at Michigan, a good run defender. This year, he lost some weight in the offseason. He claims he's the same size, so he slimmed down, let's say. He said he was doing a lot of stairs and cardio, so he's leaned up. The only person in quarantine to do that. And it's shown up on the field. He looks more explosive. He looks twitchier. He's got a little better pass rush plan against the Texans a couple times. He showed a nice long arm, a little bit more bend around the corner than we are used to seeing from him. So there's development there. I think, when you look at someone, I had someone around the league compare him to why can't I think of his name? Oh my goodness. Cam Jordan, sorry, with New Orleans. And I could see his face. I'm just like, what? And Cam Jordan took a little bit of time. He was a good run defender early and developed into a really disruptive pass rusher. For the first month of the year, though, Rashawn Gary was Green Bay's best pass rusher. He was outplaying Preston Smith. And Zadarius Smith was, I would say, a less consistent down-to-down player than Gary was. Gary was not great on Sunday against the Vikings, and I still think has plenty of room to grow from a polish standpoint, but someone with his physical tools, I mean, it is not hyperbole to say one of the most singularly physically gifted players to ever come into the league. His speed score is not like boggles math. Same with his relative athlete score. So it's one of those things where they're banking on upside and coaching to maximize his potential. Whether or not he can actually get to that ceiling, of course, is still yet to be written. If you're putting together a blueprint, Josh Sweat, I think, is a good blueprint. It took him a little bit. Year 3, all of a sudden, now we're seeing him start to really play well. He came into the league as a 21-year-old raw prospect. Rashawn Gary came into the league as a 21-year-old raw prospect. They're banking on talent there.
I mean, that's kind of been, Gutekunst's MO of late too with drafting players. I mean, he's drafted a lot of guys that have a ton of talent, a ton of physical tools. You could even apply that same methodology to Jordan Love in the first round. And I think in the secondary as well, and this is where I want to kind of get to, Jair Alexander is obviously a stud, but they've also invested in other picks in the secondary, some young players there, Josh Jackson, Kevin King, Darnell Savage, all in and of themselves have good tools. Darnell Savage had one of the best, 10-yard splits at the safety position we saw in that class. And I think development is so much more important when evaluating players or when looking at the draft and looking at prospects than even the evaluation part. Because I think evaluation is almost overrated. It is not necessarily difficult, in my opinion, to evaluate the best athletes, the best prospects in the class, especially with all the data you have available, film made available, Consensus Sports, etc. The difficult part is developing this talent and developing Rashawn Gary, developing Josh Jackson, Alexander, Jordan Love, into being the prospects they can be down the road. What has your opinion been of the development process for Green Bay for those young defensive backs I speak to? Obviously, Jair Alexander panning out of late. I think he's PFF's highest graded cornerback right now, but Josh Jackson there, Darnell Savage, Kevin King, etc.
I think one of the reasons why Jerry Gray is now the DB's coach in Green Bay is because Green Bay was not satisfied with the coaching that was being done there. And the Packers DBs rave about Jerry Gray, formerly in Minnesota, obviously helped Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris become all-world players. And I would say did some good work with Xavier Rhodes, although the rest of the talent there never really panned out. In terms of development, Jair Alexander came in with the right attitude. And this is what you talk about. And this is Mike Smith, the outside linebackers coach, insists Rashawn Gary works harder than anyone on their team. And they said on the field, he's got a mentality like a rattlesnake. And that those two combinations prove that he will not fail. And so it's not just coaching that makes development possible. It is how bad do you want to be great? And I think that's something that we do miss in evaluations because it's hard to quantify. It's hard to figure out. Even if you talk to a guy, it's not hard to be trained to say the right things, right? That's what agents are for. That's what managers are for. That's what coaches are for. We know what players are supposed to say in those moments. To really know is hard. Jair Alexander is a dog, and we know that he is a dog. I think Sunday showed a little bit for the Packers. We don't know how many more dogs they have on that team. And so how bad do you want to be great? That is something that, you want to see a little bit more edge in Darnell Savage. You saw it at Maryland. He was a heat-seeking missile at Maryland. And whether it's scheme, whether it's, confidence, whether it's injury, he hasn't been that guy in 2020 the way that we saw early in 2019. He's also had some injuries, so that's hurt him a little bit. The development of some of the young talent has been better than others. I think it's been a mixed bag. I mean, you look at Elton Jenkins, he was just ready to go. How much credit does Adam Stenavich, the offensive line coach, get for Elton Jenkins when he came in from day one and just looked great? I don't know. Is that a GM making a great pick? Is that, a coach having, the right scheme for him? I think these things can be difficult to parse. But there is also a reason why Mike Patton is on the hot seat in Green Bay, and it's because there is a lot of talent on this defense, and they're not performing to that talent.
That's a very good point. I mean, you're getting ready to have me run through this brick wall over here. How great do I want to be great? But yeah, that's a very good point with Darnell Savage. I mean, last year, 77.4 coverage grade. This year, 53.7. I mean, it's a pretty steep drop off. I mean, Jair Alexander, if we did a redraft, he's the number one cornerback off the board, in my opinion. So I do think that is a very good point with, the developmental pieces versus, how badly do you want to be great? Because that's a very subjective measure. You can't quantify it.
If Mike Renner was on this interview right now, he'd be laughing because I talk about that all the time. I talk about how important the interview process is for these prospects because I'm always one on this pod that's pushing to interview some of these guys and talk to them about, their preparation process, what, their diet and stuff like that. Because when I talked to Brian Burns coming out of Florida State and you talked about how often this guy's working and how often he's watching tape, you can tell from players how much they want to be great. And I think you can get that from certain players and you can get the opposite from other players. You've had some opposite interviews as well. So I think there's a big reason why too, when you talk to other draft evaluators, talk to Daniel Jeremiah, Mayock, all these guys, they say the combine is really important for the freaking interviews. Talking to these players is so important. Getting an idea of, how they're approaching things, their preparation, their commitment, how much film they're watching, all that stuff I think is super important. Let's close.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I just want to throw this question at you guys. Let's say Jair Alexander is the guy that we've seen so far, and we redrafted at the end of this season, and starting in 2021 and beyond, you could have Jair Alexander or Derwin James, because that was the choice Green Bay had to make, and they traded out of that spot. The Chargers ended up taking Derwin James 2 spots later. Green Bay trades back up for Jair Alexander.
I would take Jair Alexander, I think. And I think I would take Jair Alexander. One, plays a more valuable position. And two, I think we've seen more from him, more where I feel confident in him affecting the valuable parts of the game. Winning valuable routes downfield, sticking with receivers, playing shadow coverage on the outside is honestly the hardest task in the NFL right now. Playing shadow coverage at outside corner is difficult. Marshawn Lattimore is struggling. Stephon Gilmore is struggling. These guys that are, in the past have been good. Jair Alexander proving that. Even Tre'Davious White, compared to previous years, is struggling this year. I think I would take Jair over Derwin. Tony, where are you heading on that question?
Yeah, 10 times out of 10, Jair over
Wow,
Derwin.
10 times out of 10.
10 times out of 10. It's the valuable position. As you said, that's what matters the most on the defensive side of the ball. And plus, the injury history too. Like you said, we've seen more from Jair Alexander to know what we will probably get. There's some volatility in cornerback play, so he's probably not always going to be great. We're seeing that with Stephon Gilmore this year, but I'm more confident in Jair Alexander than I am Derwin James moving forward.
I think they both have the same amount of dog in them, though. No one's debating that. I think they're both dogs and swag off the charts. I wanted to finish with this, because this is going to be a conversation sooner enough. It's not being talked about now because everyone and their mother wants to talk about Will Fuller. And as we're recording this, there's 3 minutes to the deadline here. But I have to bring up, I know you said earlier in the interview that you're a big fan of Aaron Jones. He's a good football player. Do the Green Bay Packers pay market value for Aaron Jones? Do they back up the proverbial Brinks truck and pay the running back Aaron Jones as much as he'll likely call for, as he'll ask for on the open market this offseason?
Oh, I hate this question. And I hate it
so
because
does everyone,
hard.
right?
No, I hate it because it's hard.
It's so tough.
And they're consternating over it at 1265 Lombardi Ave too. I mean, it's something that I think is really difficult. If for no other reason than, I think there is intangible benefits in rewarding good players for your locker room's sake, rewarding popular players. Yep. And you don't want your whole locker room to be thinking, well, it doesn't matter what I do, Green Bay's not going to extend me. And Russ Ball, who handles the money for Green Bay's front office, is already not popular in the league with players or agents because they have a price. And if you're not going to meet it, bye. And they did it with Micah Hyde. They didn't even offer Micah Hyde a contract. They just said, you know what? Nah, we're good.
Man.
And that's a bummer. And I blame Dom Capers for that one, not Ted Thompson and Russ Ball, because Dom Capers had no idea that Micah Hyde was the best safety on his team and it wasn't Ha Ha Clinton-Dix. I blame Dom Capers for that. And I guess I need to know what the rest of the salary cap looks like. If it's that floor that we're talking about, that whatever it is, that 170s number, it becomes really tough. Anything over 10 is hard for me.
He's going to ask for more than 10, my friend.
I know he is. I don't think he is going to ask for the 16, the Christian McCaffrey number. Dalvin Cook, he was closer to 14.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably where he will want to be. The Packers will want to be more like 10. Maybe they meet in the middle and get to 12. I don't know that that's a terrible deal. You can tell that this is tough for me, guys.
Yes.
I don't know that that's a terrible deal, the way that like the Ezekiel Elliott deal was, but it's tough. It seems like we're not going to get a trade. So just we haven't gotten any official word yet that there's no deal, but we haven't heard anything. Maybe the silence from the newsbreakers means something's happening.
Yeah, it's 4:00 Eastern right now. Trade deadline's hitting. No official news on Will Fuller. But to close the segment here with you, Peter, to comment on the Aaron Jones conversation, it's really tough. I think there's a chance they meet in the middle between 10, 11, 12. But bottom line is I just don't know if I understand the value of paying him that much money. However, I talked to Solomon Wilcots, who's a colleague here at PFF, and I think when the Christian McCaffrey news broke, he had a very good rationale for it that didn't push me completely off never pay running backs, but it pushed me in a different direction in that when you have a guy as popular as Aaron Jones is or as Christian McCaffrey is in your locker room and for your fan base, it's easier as a front office to feel confident paying him that much money, regardless of positional value. And I swayed a little bit. I don't know if I'm still, I don't know if I can sway all the way, but I think Aaron Jones is that type of player. Not only is he productive, very good at the position, but you could call him a fan favorite. You could call him a team favorite even, in that he's driving those kind of intangible effects, immeasurable effects off the field and in the locker room. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm excited at how you took that question. Sit on the fence, my friend. No one wants to touch that thing. But Peter, we'll have to get you back on the podcast again, hopefully with Mike fully recovered here. But thanks again, man. Before we jump off, where can people find your work?
Easiest way, follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. By the way, Ian Rappaport saying Will Fuller won't be traded. Couldn't agree on value. So it's done. Peter_Bukowski on Twitter. I write for Acme Packing Company, Packer Report. And you can subscribe to Locked On Packers wherever you find podcasts, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. Fantastic stuff, Peter. Thanks again.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.